want to invite now the first panelist, Aradhna Pandarum. She is the acting research group leader here at the CSIR at the Energy Center in a research group called Energy Industry. She holds a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering from University of KZN, the Durban campus. She has a master's degree in electrical engineering in renewable energy from the University of Witwatersrand. She joined us recently, I think in the past 5 months. She joined the CSIR, coming from CSIR. Please, Aradhna. Coming from ESCOM, sorry. Please, Aradhna, take the floor.
Okay, thanks, Brian, and thanks, Shingi, for the presentation. Um, yeah, I think there's quite a few touch points from the presentation, and many aspects have been mentioned. From our point of view, yes, there's a definite need for understanding holistic impacts in terms of the pathways that we are going to be pursuing for a transition or transitions in the country and globally. I think that has to incorporate, you've touched on it, the environmental aspect, the technology, the cost, the social aspect, and the economic aspect as well. And that's how, we at the Energy Center are pursuing some of the research in terms of selecting pathways for the future in terms of the technologies, etc. as well. I think the just transition framework that has been produced by the PCC is a great piece of work, and it does pave the way in terms of trying to define what that justice should look like for the country. And I think that it's much needed because there's various understandings of what just is, right? And that's why if we consider the JET P emanating from the PCC, I feel that it might be an ETP in terms of energy transition partnership, and the just element might not be coming out holistically and as significantly as it needs to. You've spoken about jobs and the job creation, and you've put the picture up in terms of the work that I think we've done for the IRP, showing the net increase in jobs of 35,000 until 2030. But yeah, I think my colleague will speak more about this. But again, we need to be able to say what type of jobs are those, what the quality of jobs is going to be, and how do we even get to that point? Because at the moment, you've also highlighted the skills aspect, and we have a significant skills gap for renewable technologies. We have a renewable energy independent power producer program that's going on for, if you add in from the inception, it's about almost 15 years now. But if you go to the Northern Cape and you actually speak to the economic development department, you'll actually find that even though 60% of the penetration of renewables is in the Northern Cape, they will tell you they don't have skills for renewable energy. And if that's the first step, we are missing something. We're definitely missing something as a country. I know you've mentioned there's a need for us to transition, but I think one thing you missed out is Africa warms twice as fast as anywhere else in the world. And I know Brian mentioned that we are not the major emitters. We haven't been the major emitters. We are the 12th largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. However, that 12th is equivalent to about 4% of the emissions globally, around there. And that just puts it in perspective in terms of our impact. But if Africa is going to be the ones at the forefront that would, have to kind of be the guards at the climate change gate, we are going to fall first. And a recent UN study said that there's about 200,000 people in Africa that is at risk if we do not transition, if we do not move now until 2030. That's 200,000 lives until 2030. And 2030 is just around the corner. It's not like, I'm talking 2050. So that is something I think as a country and as Africa, we need to highlight. And I don't think that comes out quite significantly in the COP discussions. And as you said, it's an African COP, but I know there was a recent article in the public that said it's just Africa is hosting it. It's not an African COP, and it's people that are dictating to us what to do, and that's a problem, because if they are dictating their own agendas, then we need to be able to put ourselves there and say, stop. No, we need to be able to plan this out properly. I've been in many discussions about green hydrogen, and I think you haven't touched on that, because that is like past renewables, and we still have to get through the renewables barrier. But even in terms of that, it's again, the greater north dictating to the greater south what to do. But we don't have the skills, we don't have the strategies in place, we don't have the pathways or the implementing actions to get onto the pathways. We may have the pathway, but the actual actions that need to be implemented is another story. And it's going to take a long time. I think that the one thing that was also maybe not so much touched on, I think we speak about the community and we speak about, the stakeholders involved. One stakeholder I feel is being missed out in this discussion is the local municipalities, and the capacity building that needs to happen within the local municipalities to create enabling environments for these technologies. Just looking at rooftop PV, everyone knows that rooftop PV exists, and because of load shedding, it's become a big hype and many people are going towards that. But out of the 200 or so municipalities in South Africa, I would say not even 80% or not even 20% of those municipalities even have application processes in place for just rooftop PV, just to accept an installation on their network. So, if we're talking about these large infrastructure projects that has to go through the local municipalities, because at the end of the day, they have to sign off on permits and be part of that process, they don't have the capacity in terms of the mental capacity as well as the human resource capacity to actually do that. And the other aspect is in terms of the communities, we're talking about to create better livelihoods. And it's not only about just creating a job or employment. It is also trying to create customer ownership within these large infrastructure projects. We are going to green hydrogen, we're talking about 200 gigawatts of renewables to be installed on our potential network. I'll get to that just now. But that's large, significant infrastructure projects that will be lying next to these communities, and the communities will have nothing to do with them. And they will sabotage it, because you must also think about, the history of South Africa and what we've been through as a country and what these people have been through. We need to take them on. And they say, you take us on, it's with us, for us, with us. That's their motto, and also stems to the municipalities as well. And you spoke about the solar, and you mentioned the grid capacity with battery storage. Yes, solar and wind is the least cost pathway. In terms of the decommissioning schedule, if we had decommissioned and in parallel commissioned according to the REIP, or the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer, according to what was in the IRP, we would not be in this situation in terms of load shedding. The problem is we are not implementing the renewable energy programs as fast as we need to be implementing it in the country. And that is why we are at the stage of now looking at the power stations, should we decommission it or not? And it's a good question, because we don't have that capacity to decommission. We're supposed to have added it. We had a risk, a risk power producer program that was published 2 years ago. And the first project from the risk, it was an emergency procurement program as a country. The first one was only starting to be implemented or constructed this year. It was an emergency procurement program, and we took almost 3 years to start construction on the first one. So I think it also comes down to the government, the cohesion in the government they're not talking the same story. It feels like everyone is everywhere. People want certain things. Now the finance minister has mentioned that Eskom's debt would only be released, or they'll get that debt released if they build nuclear and gas. Really? I mean, we in a transition, and we the thing about the just energy transition and what it presents to the country, it presents significant opportunities for us to actually innovate and create that capacity in the country, and I think that must not be lost as well. But we need to put our foot down in terms of this is what we need as a country. And if those international partners are not giving us that, I don't know what to do. I don't have the solutions, but I mean, we need to be able to be vocal about that, because at the end of the day, it is for us, with all of us. It's our taxpayers' money, and eventually those are not free. That money is not free money, by the way, guys. It's not, it's not just going to be thrown at us. We're going to have to pay it back in some way or the other. So that's another thing that we just need to be cognizant of. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Aradhna. I'm prompted to say a little bit more about what you've said, but I'm not going to do so. I want to give the floor now to Dr. Martin Kaggwa. Dr. Martin is the Executive Research Director at the same Tambani Research Institute. It's called SATRI. It's a research institute of the National Union of Mine Workers and the Mine Workers Investment Trust in South Africa. He has more than 20 years of applied research practice and academic teaching at university level. His current research focus is on extractive energy and socioeconomic extractives energy and socioeconomic development dynamics of countries and communities that are rich in natural resources. Please, Martin.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm happy to be here to just bring another perspective to the just transition. As mentioned, I think by Dr. Mtanga and the previous speaker, I would like to begin by saying that the issue of energy transition is an interest issue. There are issues of interests. And if you don't capture the interest of the different parties that are involved in the energy transition, then you are missing a good part of the discussion and the intervention that needs to be done. That's one. Secondly, the issue of just transition can be looked from a micro perspective. Who is it going to affect directly? And it can also be looked at a macro level perspective, at a national level. So there are benefits at a macro level that can accrue to the entire country. And there are costs that a country can incur if it embarks on the energy transition. But the same applies to the people. There are individuals whose livelihood may be positively affected and those whose livelihood will be drastically affected. So it is important to ask, if you talk about just transition, just for who? For the country? For the people? For which cluster of people or interest group? Because the moment we don't get clarity on that, then we shall be debating a lot of things, but which are based on the wrong foundation. And unfortunately, we in Africa, we are very good at debating issues, not knowing that they're built on a faulty or a cracked foundation. So for me, those are very important aspects. As I've been introduced, I head a research institute of a union that is composed of workers that work in the energy, in the construction, and the metal sectors of recent. So when you sit with these people, they ask you, Martin, what is this thing called a just energy transition? What is it need for me? What does it mean to me? So we need to ask, you need to give them a very clear, non-academic, non-theoretical answer. So, first of all, why is it happening? Okay, because all they want is to secure their livelihood of their dependents, and also to have certainty that they will be employed tomorrow. Sometimes people talk about there will be alternative livelihoods. But I know most of us here have some guarantee of livelihood. We have some contract somewhere. We know we can run to a lawyer if Dr. Mtang is dismissed by Brian. You know, there are some checks and controls. But the workers out there, they also ask the same question. This transition that you want to make, right? What is it in for me? And I can promise you, it is very hard to justify the public benefit at a macro level. Oh, the air will be so great for South Africa, and Africa will breathe very easily when somebody says, but I won't be able to eat or to take my child to school. And for me, having been in academia, now working with the workers, these are very pertinent questions that I struggle with every day to convince these people that, comrades, embrace this aspect because it is going to benefit you. So sometimes we struggle to point the benefits at a micro level, although we can point the benefits at a country, not even at a country, at a global level, because you can see that a cleaner world, everybody will be happy. That's easy to articulate, but cascading it down to an individual becomes very problematic. So as we debate this just transition, it is important that we also reflect at a macro level what can be done to make it just. Because if it is not just at a micro level, then it can never be just at a macro level. So that's my first observation. The second aspect I would like to talk about, they said, what is the reality? The reality climate change is a fact. The reality that is affecting different places, humanity, is also a fact. But the degree at which it's affecting people differs from one country to another, from one community to another. And hence, its priority in different clusters of people are different. For those whose livelihood depend on the so-called dirty energy, their priority about climate is not as high as those who already have energy and they have alternatives. I hope there's no German in the audience, because I still want to get a job with the Germans. That's a joke. If you look at a country like Germany that spearheaded the just transition, they already had alternatives. They had nuclear from France. They had they also had coal power plants, and they came up with their CSR came out with very strong renewable energy technologies. So by the time they made the decision to go renewable, they had options. That cannot apply to a country which is still suffering from energy poverty. So the person saying, I don't have power yet, but for you, your debate is which power? Doesn't make sense, does it? I don't have a power yet, power poverty. Second, power affordability. Because people ignore that just power being there doesn't mean that people can afford them. everybody is screaming about load shedding. How many of you have interviewed people who don't have ESCOM power? What their feeling is about load shedding? Let me ask you, load shedding, oh, is it happening? Because you are already in the category that can afford. But also the liability, that power is reliable. It is good for industrialization. It is good for manufacturing and for mining and for jobs. So it is important, colleagues and my seniors, to be realistic of what, to define what just should be in terms of energy transition. And I have a fundamental problem of baptizing a process a just transition before it is just. Then we work backwards. Okay, what is it that can make it just? So it is an energy transition. The issue of making it just is the $1 million question that all of us have to put our thoughts together. From technology, we want CSIR to tell us what technology is it that they can bring to South Africa that will create the justness that we have defined ourselves, such that the CSIR is supporting the just energy transition, right? So when Dr. Mtanga and CSIR invited me to talk about the just energy transition, it reminded me, and this is a joke, don't be offended, there is a country where they baptize children adjectives, English adjectives. So before you are clever, they baptize you clever. And I'm thinking to myself, why don't you wait? Because reality may disappoint you. So, from a strictly workers' perspective, we think that indeed there's a need for climate change, right? But the process has to be managed. Time, how long it takes, is also a factor into determining the justness, because there are some safeguards that need to be put in place. There are some commitments that need to be put in place. For instance, if you are a mine worker in Mpumalanga, you have to say, will we give you an alternative job? Okay, are you going to go on social grant? Will we give you early retirement? But what will that mean to your individual dignity? Because sometimes people forget, all of us here, even if somebody say, we'll give you the paycheck you are having today, but start home, you say, no, I'll look for somewhere else to at least keep me busy instead of just taking that money. So we also simplify the, no, government grants, but we have taken away human dignity. So we are saying that it is important that we redefine what just means for us and as a country. And then all of us in the different expertise, technology, economists, come together to say, how can we make sure that we implement the justness in this energy transition that we all agree upon in order to make it just for us, not for anybody, but for us. Finally, in the interest of time, there is this issue about financing, where everybody talks about donor funding, partner funding, collaboration. Colleagues, if your interests and your definition of justness are not aligned with whoever you're going to get money from, then that money will not be useful to you. As a research entity that is embedded in workers' constituency, we have lost a lot of funding by simply saying, no, you can't simply give us money to seek people's opinion about just a transition, and you call them that you have consulted them. Because first of all, you introduce the topic they don't know, and you want them to give you an opinion, and you want to end up justifying the answer you already have. So we are not going to be part of that research. We produce the research that the green jobs are the few jobs you can create in wind energy generation are during the construction, during the operation. The windmill can be operated remotely. And you want us to say, no. There are so many green jobs that you can create. But I say, look at the ground, it's not happening. then they say, no more funding for SATRI. And I talked, I wish I had the ear of this CSR CEO. I say, you know what? Each nation, there's research, it should fund using its own money without any condition for its own interests. And the moment we lose that, colleagues, this well-packaged energy transition will not serve the purpose of this country, of the workers, and in the end, all of us who would have been part of the process of selling it out to the poor, to those that don't have power, to those that believe that we can create a better future for them, will be ashamed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. I'm going to quickly move to the last panelist before opening the floor for your inputs. The last panelist is Dr. Njabulo Siyakatshana. Njabulo is the research group leader of one of the research groups here at CSIR in the climate change team. Before joining the CSIR, he was at NECSA, which is the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation. Before joining NECSA, he was here at CSIR. And at that time, he was a research group leader of Modeling and Digital Science Unit, the old MDS. So Njabulo, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for the introduction. I'll just keep my comment short in the interest of time. But for me, the central message, I mean, a lot has already been said, so I don't even know what I can say anymore about just energy transition. But for me, the central message that Shingi has mentioned was that there is a need to not leave anyone behind in the just energy transition. That's the central message. And because it's a global debate, it's not only a debate that's happening in South Africa. I think we also need to make sure that South Africa is not left behind in the just energy debate from a global perspective. And what I can reflect on is the fact that climate change is the process that has brought about the debate on just transition. And climate change is a process, a very long process. But if there's one event that I believe has changed the perspective and might actually accelerate the just energy transition debate, is the war in Ukraine, because of the energy crisis that it's imposed on the world. I think there's a realization now in the world that we need desperately alternative energy sources. And because of climate change, the debate was ongoing. It was a long debate, but now I believe that the world has taken note of that. And what can we do in South Africa in order to contribute to that debate? I prefer to look at it from an opportunity perspective. What are the opportunities that South Africa can harness in order to actually benefit from this debate? And, South Africa is blessed with, for example, a lot of mineral wealth. I call this wealth smart minerals that we can actually take advantage of in order to contribute to the just transition. For example, we talk of renewable energies. You cannot talk of renewable energy without mentioning energy storage. And within energy storage, there are so many minerals that are critical to developing energy storage technologies that need minerals that South Africa has in almost absolute abundance in a comparison with the world. You talk of fluorspar for fluorine to make the electrolytes in batteries. You talk of manganese to make the cathodes for the lithium-ion batteries. You talk of titanium. You talk of vanadium to make vanadium flow batteries. All these are minerals that the world is scrambling for these minerals. There's companies right now that are in South Africa looking at how to buy interests in these minerals. What are we doing about it in South Africa in order to either shut them out or take advantage ourselves? My colleague has mentioned of research funding for the research that needs to be taken to contribute to the just transition. I'm saying instead of actually looking at ways of sourcing the funds that Aradhna has mentioned that actually we need to pay back. Let's look at how we can take advantage of what we already have in order for us to develop the resources that we have currently and take advantage of these in order to finance our own just transition. Thank you.
Thanks, Njabulo. Colleagues, I want to open the floor now for your comments, your questions, your input to the conversation. Please be clear to whom you are directing your question to, or if you want make a comment, you are more than welcome. How do we do this now? Or you can speak from the floor. Yes, please continue, Mark.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Brian, and thanks to the panelists. I think you guys are very brave in terms of what you've said today. And
Sorry, Mark, may you please also introduce yourself?
yeah, Mark Gordon, University of Tshwane. Yeah, so I'm not sure really what message you're giving the floor or giving us today, because I think some of you have been speaking from your personal convictions as well. But I think as CSR, you've done a sterling job with all your research papers and all of that. And I think to what extent this translates into policy and plans is the next challenge for South Africa. Right now in the energy sector, we don't really have a plan to solve the Eskom crisis. I'm not sure if you've seen the latest pictures floating around from Kusile, but power stations are literally breaking down daily. And years ago, we started with climate change. We moved from trajectory, then to transition. Now it's pathways. Do we really have a plan to solve all of these different challenges? And I really appreciate what Martin is saying. I mean, very sobering, but very bold. And I think these kind of bold moves really take us forward, and also the last speaker in terms of not leaving people behind. So we're sitting with very high unemployment. We have to find jobs for the 93,000 people in Mpumalanga, and yet we don't really seem to have a plan. So South Africa, we produce less than 1% of global emissions, yet we have one of the highest aspirations with developing countries in terms of the Paris Agreement. And my question is, there's so many competing interests. How do we prioritize exactly what's needed for the country? The single biggest impact on our economy is the energy sector. Now, closing down all these power stations, and we don't have the grid capacity to handle all the renewable energy that we'd love to put on. Even if we had 7,000 megawatts of renewables tomorrow, we would still have load shedding because we simply don't have the grid capacity. And so, yeah, with all of these, where do you see the interface? We battled for years between policy and science, disjunct, and now it's science to plans. How do you see the CSR research organizations like yourself kind of punching above your weight to get decisions into Parliament for a just transition? And I like I forget your name, but the recent addition to your team, Brian, that we got to really qualify what we really mean by just. So yeah, I think two questions: is there a plan, and how do we bridge this gap between research and real plans that's adopted by cabinet, parliament? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I'm not gonna go to the panel. I want to take a few more questions, if any. Yes, please.
Good day. My name is Mandisa Kaggwa. I recently came back from Africa Energy Week, which took place in Cape Town last week, and there was much conversation around just transition, obviously. But one of the things that really came out of the conference, and I think it's true to what you were saying, Martin, is that we've got an abundance of hydrocarbons. And the African approach to just transition cannot be a leapfrog approach, right? Ours is going to take a bit more time and consideration, really. And when we talk about energy poverty as well, it's mostly women who are most affected. And so as entrepreneurs, I think the challenge also is to build models which are women facing, children facing, and let's not be lazy in our thinking. I think a lot of people, when they think, they're like, no, entrepreneurs, you just solve a problem. You don't need to direct it. Your money doesn't matter where it comes from. But if we're going to solve the energy issue, we do need to start reimagining the business models that we put together, and they need to be quite women facing. I think that's the challenge I'd like to give to entrepreneurs in the room. And yeah, so I think for now I'd leave it there. So more of a challenge and a comment, and yeah.
Thanks. Let me take the last comment before giving the floor to the panelist, Moha.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the topic has and the background for just transition has nicely been laid out in terms of the challenges that need to be addressed, as well as the scope at which they could be addressed. And thanks, Dr. Mutanga, for taking us through all this theoretical background. I think one aspect which probably could benefit from a little bit of stratification is the issue of scale when you talk of just transition. By scale, I think we could even go as far as separating the scale. First, I think the discourse could look into the issue of horizontal integration, as well as the vertical integration of just transition. And in the case of Africa, often when you talk of horizontal integration of just transition, we seldom forget to talk about all the catalytic sectors of the economy throughout the continent. A lot of focus is given to the energy sector, but the concept of just transition is really relevant across all the sectors. And in the case of Africa, when we talk about intracontinental trade, this even becomes more relevant. Of course, the issue of vertical integration becomes relevant because you have to start somewhere. And in the case of South Africa, of course, a lot of focus has been given to the energy sector, and the agriculture sector and other sectors are equally relevant and could probably benefit from the expansion of the discourse into these other sectors at the research level. Thanks.
Thanks, Moha. Let me give Aradhna and then Martin time to respond before we proceed. Aradhna?
Okay, thanks for the questions. I think to the first colleague who asked the questions in terms of, is there a plan? I don't think there is a plan. And the main reason, again, in my view, from what I've seen from a research perspective, is because of the cohesion between the departments in terms of the government level. It also filters down into the DMRE and their significant role in this discussion. The Integrated Resource Plan is probably the document that would be needed to at least fast track or be the first point of entry for this plan. The Integrated Resource Plan of 2019 is already outdated. As you know, we're supposed to have been decommissioning 5 gigawatts. I think 2 days ago, we've now started to decommission the last unit at Komati, which is comparatively nothing in terms of that 5 gigawatts. You've mentioned that there is no capacity in terms of the grid. I beg to differ, because there is about 6 gigawatts of capacity in Mpumalanga from a transmission development plan perspective. And there is no capacity where the resources are the best, and that's the problem in terms of the IPP office and their rules in terms of competitiveness and where they actually pay in terms of paying at the gate versus paying at the consumer point, etc., etc. So that needs to change. We've done some research in terms of the co-benefits of actually adding renewables in Mpumalanga and what that means from an employment perspective, from a gender inclusivity perspective, from an industrialization perspective, and also looking at the other sectors that would be, in terms of localization would be required for renewables. So I think in terms of that, I think that can assist with that aspect. And as I said, the plan needs to start with the integrated resource plan. It also needs to start with the integrated energy plan. We do have, I think, a 2009 or whatever, I don't even know, very old integrated energy plan. And now these discussions of green hydrogen is emerging, and green hydrogen is effectively energy, not electricity. We will not be using the end use as electricity for green hydrogen. And that is significant economic growth for the country from that perspective. Because if we look at our greenhouse gas emissions, 46% only comes from the electricity sector. We still have to decarbonize the other sectors. And that's where green hydrogen is coming out. In terms of research, I think we have to, it also goes back to the funding aspects and, in terms of the needs from our clients, not our clients in terms of government now. There are a lot of policy recommendations that do come out of our projects. One such one is the co-benefits that I've mentioned in terms of trying to fast track the industrialization of renewables in Mpumalanga and what that means for the country. And we try to complete research in terms of, trying to effectively produce almost a policy recommendation or policy brief to these departments. And in my view, it's for us, it's the energy or the DMRE or DPE that would be the main stakeholder there. There is a research gap, and we are trying to fill it with whatever capacity we have and whatever plans we have in terms of that. In terms of entrepreneurship, for the second speaker, I think I failed to mention that we are actually launching an energy industry support program. I actually term it the Just Transition in Action, and we are actually going to be helping and assisting SMMEs for the next 5 years in collaboration with EWCETA. And there's 75 SMMEs for that program that we will be assisting in the energy space. And to your comment about women and trying to have that inclusivity aspect, some of the requirements are centered around that, obviously to the extent of what we can actually get from the market. But I think we do need to go further in terms of looking at the communities around these power stations first affected, trying to we just look at the people who can work at the moment, but it actually needs to start from early childhood. We need to be able to say what needs to happen at that stage for them to reach the skills gap that is going to be created in the future. And we're already seeing that there's a huge gap between it, in terms of just students or normal school children not wanting to take on maths and science. That's a huge problem for us. If we're talking about this energy transition or a transition, it needs to incorporate a lot of maths and science. And if we do not help our students to actually move in that direction or try and encourage them to move in that direction, we'll never make that gap. We'll never fill that gap up. The same with women. We need to be able to cater for women in different ways. Like we found in the co-benefit study that if we are creating TVET skills course, which we are in Kangala TVET College, we'll be launching that on the 18th of November in collaboration with Race for Africa and other foundations. And one of the major things was we need to create an environment for women to be able to leave their children in daycare centers so that they can actually attend this. And it's these small things that we need to consider to help for inclusivity. We have done some of the research around it, but obviously, as I said, we need to go down to that bottom level to see how to actually make it a sustainable solution going forward. In terms of the last question, I think I because of time, I'm not going to delve too much into the content because it is a very big discussion. And I just want to say that in Africa, the countries want to compete against each other. I don't know why, but that's the case. If you look at even just green hydrogen, Namibia is already going on with their green hydrogen strategy. And I believe that if we go together as Africa, as a continent, we'd be much stronger. But unfortunately, that's not happening. So from a research perspective, I'm trying to just focus on South Africa at the moment. That is part of, some of the recommendations, creating strategic partnerships and also trying to assist the other African countries with their just energy transition plans. But I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. Thanks.
Thank you. I think the comments about entrepreneurship and prioritizing what is just for South Africa and Africa, I think I appreciate them because they are relevant. I also don't have a specific comment on that, but I'll try to answer the first question that came through. What is the message? I think that is fundamental. We talked a lot. So the prof asked, what is the message about just energy transition? For me, in summary, the key takeaway is that we acknowledge the problem of climate. We acknowledge that there is a need to change the energy in the context of the environment, which has been coined as just energy transition. But we need to have our own formula. Our trajectory should be based on our own terms, depending on our own unique circumstances and priorities. So we need to be able to say what are our unique circumstances and then be able to bring everybody who has a contribution to those unique circumstances such that they are part and parcel of the process. So we agree there's a need for energy transition, but we don't agree on the blueprint of the transition. We need to rethink and be able to redefine our own blueprint. Of course, we are not disregarding everything in the current narrative. The energy issues there have been energy problems in the country and the solution is not being found. I think some of the answers I could give to the solution to the energy problem in this country are above my pay grade. But I'll make one comment. Yes, I'm a very junior person. We at SATRI, for instance, we have commissioned a small research, we're using our own resources to say, how does the breakdown of ESCOM power plants compare to the global average? Because sometimes we feel there's something we don't understand. But as I said, some of these questions are beyond my pay grade. Thank you, Chair.
Mark is offering to increase your pay. Colleagues, I'm looking at time. Thank you for your patience with us. This is a very exciting topic. I'm very hesitant to stop it here. I'm not going to try to summarize today's conversation. But what sticks out to me, again, I told you that I'm wedded to language, is the use of terminology. We talk about just transition, just transitions, just energy transition. I think these are very different concepts, related but different. And that reflects where we are, some of us, in terms of conceptualizing this issue. I just want to highlight that within CSIR, Aradhna leads our work on just energy transition, which is a different phenomenon to just transition. I just want to point that out because to me that matters. It matters on how then do we focus what Mark was asking about the plans, because if you are planning about just energy transition, it would be different to planning about just transition. As Mohau was saying, that it's not about energy only, it's about all the sectors. So colleagues, it's an ongoing conversation. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us. I want to thank Mudanga for his keynote speech. I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time to join us this afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to share this time with us. Let's keep in touch in the corridors and online. Thank you.